right? If all I cared about was making money, there are many things that I would never do that I do so that people are happy.
All of a sudden now you're at West Point. So tell us about, kind of that wake up call.
Had the TV on and we all watched as the towers were burning, right? And then he turned the TV off and said, okay, guys, here's the deal. We're going to continue the mission.
You took what, some would say would a simple business and you franchise it to over 100 franchises doing, 189 million. So,
people ask me all the time, like, why'd you franchise? Why did you do that? I'm like, listen, it wasn't my idea. So 2018, I tell people 2018 literally almost killed me.
Welcome to the Grit.org podcast. In these episodes, they speak to top achievers in athletics and business to understand the habits and mindset they apply in order to build more grit.
Hello, my name is Brian Harbin. Welcome to today's episode of the Grit.org podcast with my co-host and wife, Jen Harbin, and super excited about today's guest, Zach Peyton. And today's episode is brought to you by escrow.com. They do over $6 billion in transactions that are protected by escrow.com. We recently sold ecash.com. That was a good six-figure sale. We sold through them, pxt.com and sofresh.com. So, but wanted to get in with Zach Peyton. So Zach is from Tyler, Texas, graduate of West Point. After the military, he started Superior Fence and Rail Company, fencing company he's run for over 16 years, grew it to over 100 locations in 34 states, doing over $189 million in annual revenue. They recently sold to a private equity company, and he's still working with them to this day and has a couple other side projects he's working on as well. Married to Carly, has 4 kids, and we're neighbors as well. He claims to be a bad golfer, but don't know about that one. But Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. And I definitely am a bad golfer. Like that's not a claim. It's unfortunately true. So that's okay though.
Yeah, it's all good. You apply the same habits and skills to everything else you've done. You'll be just fine. Yeah. But Zach, always loved to start off with growing up and some of those founding principles. So growing up in Tyler, Texas, I know it's somewhat of a small town, home of YWAM. But tell us about your upbringing in Eastern Texas and kind of early experiences to kind of help shape your values. And
well, it's the rose capital of the world. I don't know if you know.
Interesting.
Ooh, I don't know if
the world, but definitely the rose capital of the U.S. Maybe the rose capital of Texas. I don't know. I should know that, Tyler. So I was actually born at home, right? Because my mom,
me too. Nice.
My mom was still is a labor and delivery nurse. And so, I don't know if it was like 4th kid, like, hey, let's just have this at home. Like I could relate, but so I was born at home in Chandler, Texas, which is just outside of Tyler. Right. And, I think we had kind of like a typical 90s kind of childhood, right? My parents split up sometime, I think in the early 90s, right? And then my mom had this like kind of gypsy streak in her. So she wanted to travel all around the world and take these like not around the world, around the country, take these like traveling nurse assignments. So I kind of tagged along with her around the country. But I think, what I took with me as I traveled around with her was this sort of like East Texas mentality, right? And I don't really know how to explain it other than like it's like a self-reliance thing. Like people in East Texas, I think, are super self-reliant. They're like, no, I don't need anybody to do anything for me. I'm gonna kind of like make do with what I got, type thing. So I do a lot of, I think, odd things around the house. And Carly's like, why are you doing that? Putting like water into the shampoo to like make the most out of it. I'm
nice.
In East Texas, that shampoo is expensive.
Yes, yeah. It's an East Texas thing.
I don't think it's just an East Texas thing, but so yeah. And then growing up, like moving all around, I feel like that. I don't know. I mean, it helped me like become better at adapting to new situations, right? Because I was constantly doing that. I mean, we moved a ton. And when I say a ton, I mean, like, even we would go to a city and then move like 2 or 3 times within that city. And so, I feel like I became really good at just adapting to, okay, we're living here now. Okay. I need to make, some new friends. Like, okay, I need to just, I didn't have much of a choice. I just moved around a lot. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the things that I think helped me certainly become a little bit grittier, of a person to kind of, because some people don't have to move away from their home for the first time until they're going to college. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then that's a big adjustment for me. Mm-hmm. Going to college. I was like, all right, well, here we go.
Yeah. What about early on, maybe middle school, high school age? Were there sports, were there jobs, anything that you felt like kind of helped ground you in terms of just establishing that, building on that discipline?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't play sports. I played sports when I was very young. And then there was like this window until middle school, probably call it like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. I think because we were moving around so much, it's like I wasn't going to get involved in Little League. We probably would have left in the middle of the season at times, So I didn't start playing sports again until middle school, right? I've explained this to various people. I'm like, I don't know why we're so obsessed with having the kids in sports, and like that's going to make or break them, because like, first of all, like only a very small percentage are actually going to make it to any sort of like collegiate or professional level. But, but for me, I started playing football, in the 7th grade. I played that all through high school. In high school, I think my mom did okay, and her, my stepdad, they did okay, but I always had to have a job. So I had a job. Thankfully, I lived in a place where I was close enough to where I could walk to my job, So I worked in restaurants primarily, and I think kind of working and like having to, somewhat support myself for a period of time. I think that was certainly helpful, in that journey, towards being, grittier. Right. Mm-hmm. And then actually, I did finally get tired of all the moving. Right. And in the 2nd semester of my junior year, my mom was like, hey, we're moving from Arizona, where we were living at the time, to California. And, I was involved in student government. I had a crush on this other girl that was involved in student government. And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to be involved in student government. It helped me get into West Point. So it was like a beneficial thing. But I was like, I was going to be the student body vice president going into senior year. I was going to be captain of the football, or one of the like co-captains of the football team. I'm like, I don't think I really want to move. Mm-hmm. We had been there, I think, since I was in 8th grade. So actually we moved to California, and then I was like, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to move back. So I packed everything into a truck that I didn't really own. My mom owned it. And I was like, hey, I'm moving back. She'll tell you that I ran away. I did not run away. It was a very deliberate, like, okay, goodbye. I didn't like leave in the middle of the night. Like, right. She knew where I was, but she's like, you ran away.
She didn't wake up and you were just gone, and she had no clue.
So I went back and lived with 2 different friends for my final year of high school. And I think that was, probably growing up a little bit too early in some ways. But it was an experience that I don't really talk about a lot. But if, we're talking about it, like that's one of the things that I did. And people are like, huh. So then they're like, well, how did you get into West Point? Because it's like, how did you navigate all of these requirements? And I'm like, I have no idea. I have no idea. My older brother got recruited to play football. That's how I even knew that West Point existed. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, that seems like a cool place to go. I went up there and visited him in the fall, or in the spring before no, I might have done it in the fall of my senior year. And then I have no idea to this day, like how I navigated all that stuff on my own. But I think it was like an early indicator of like, okay, I need to get stuff done. I'm going to get stuff done on my own. And like, sort of like, I don't know, this whole like idea of self-sufficiency and just getting stuff done. And I have no idea how I even got to West Point. You know what I mean? Like for the visit in the fall of like senior year, I'm like, how the heck did I even get I got to go to the airport, take a flight. Like I have no memory, like no recall today of like how I even got there. I'm like, just by the grace of God, I guess I got there and then back. I'm just like, this, like, I don't know. So anyways, yeah. So that's my childhood, I think, in like a nutshell. So.
Wow. That reminds me of what you were saying earlier about just developing that sense of adaptability. You don't even remember how it happened, but you just did.
Right.
Obviously you were drawn to West Point and you made it happen.
Kid of the 80s, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. We were kids in the 80s and teenagers in the 90s. So
right.
Yeah.
Parents didn't have air tags to put in their backpack.
No, there was no air tags. I didn't have a Gab watch.
Let myself in.
Didn't
started
even have
cleaning the house in the afternoon.
I did have a beeper.
A beeper, yes.
I had a beeper.
Oh, I remember my friend. I was very jealous. She had like a pager, like a beeper, and I was super jealous. And I remember she also had not a cell phone, but a car phone.
Oh,
car. So she gave me a ride to school in high school. My friend Rachel Needle, and I remember being like, it was like the coolest thing ever. Like she could call my house phone from her car and be like, "I'm here, girl." Yeah, beauty of the 90s.
And that's got to be such a huge transition going from kind of an unstructured, sounds like high school growing up experience. All of a sudden now you're at West Point. So tell us about, kind of that wake up call being in this super structured environment.
I don't know if it's, my dad was military, and he lived a very like structured lifestyle, but I am very much a creature of habit and structure. So I thrived in that environment. Right. I didn't like getting yelled at over the summertime. That was hard. There was a point where I remember the day that I wanted to quit. Right. Like everybody goes through what they call beast barracks over the summertime. It's they call it cadet basic training now. Right. So
this is that before?
Oh, yes, that's
West
before.
Point, right? So,
okay.
So
before
you get accepted into West Point, and the summer before you start, you have to go through a basic training type environment. And I'm pretty sure everybody who goes through it at one point's like, hey, this isn't for me. I'm going to quit. And I remember the day that I walked out of the hallway and I didn't greet somebody properly, and they just lit me up from top to bottom. Like, you just killed your platoon. Like,
oh, wow.
like it's very serious. Very serious.
Yes.
That was the day that I wanted to quit. I went back to the room. I was like, I'm done here. My roommates were like, nah, man, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. So, but I did. I think I thrived in that environment. Academically is very like a science, math focused curriculum, and the math side of things, have always been kind of like my strong suit. And I kind of love the structure of it. I loved not having to think about where I needed to be. So I didn't love it. It was a very high stress environment. I just went back in October for my 20-year reunion. And my wife was like, hey, do you want to go into the dorms, or the barracks as we call them? And I was like, no, I'm good. She's like, why? What's wrong? I'm like, I've got anxiety about going back into those rooms, because it's just I've had nightmares about college. I don't know how many people have nightmares about college.
We do.
Yeah, I've had a very recent one where they're like, hey, you have to go back to West Point. And I'm like, for what? I've been out of the Army for 15 years. Why do I have to? They're like, you didn't finish your senior year. I'm like, yeah, I did. They're like, nah, you got to go back. And so I was made to go back. And I'm like, what am I even doing here? It's like a bad dream. This is like a bad dream.
You're like instantaneously brought back to that mental space that you were in when you were there.
Yeah. But that is the whole purpose of West Point, is to like take you to such an extreme edge and show you like, hey, you can actually do a lot. Under these, crazy constraints, right? The only thing I'll say is like, you do that in an environment that's relatively distraction free, right? Like there's not the normal distractions of college. Like we didn't have it's like, hey guys, it's, 50-cent beer night. Like there was no 50-cent beer night. You know what I mean? Like people ask me like, oh, how were football Saturdays? I'm like, not great, not great. Yeah. You had to clean your room. We spent Friday nights cleaning our rooms, getting ready for a Saturday morning inspection and parade, and then we'd walk up the hill to the football stadium. And when I was there, our Army football wasn't great. So there wasn't a whole lot of distractions to keep us from doing a tremendous amount of things and with all these constraints, right? Like we'd take 20 plus hours per semester, because you had to. You had to take that much time because there's no 5th year option. You have to graduate within 4 years. There's outside of that heavy academic workload, you're required to participate in intramural sports or club sports or collegiate sports or some kind of activities outside of that. And then there's the military training aspect. So I'd get maybe like 2 or 3 weeks off for the summer, a week or 2 off over the winter time. And actually over the winter time, no, we would still be there at West Point. We would get like, I don't know. We didn't get the holidays off. I don't feel like.
Did you get to go home for Christmas, like a couple days off, or you can't remember? Or you don't remember?
I
Blocked it out. Maybe.
Maybe, but I don't think so.
Okay.
I know we got a little bit of time off for Thanksgiving, but that wouldn't typically be one of my trips. Yeah, we did get some winter break time, but we'd have to go back early and we'd have winter session classes and mostly military instruction. So,
and I'm not sure what you're able to share, but was there any part of like the mental, physical, emotional training that you had to go through that you felt like was very impactful or memorable, or any stories related to that you're able to share?
I mean, yeah, the thing that comes to mind, because we're just talking about like the winter sessions, is we had to take our freshman year, we had to take this really awful math class over the winter session. And I forget exactly what the name of it was called. It was something to do, I think, with discrete dynamic systems, right? But it was a wintertime portion of that class.
Okay.
And so our instructors, a lot of our teachers and professors at West Point were military officers. So if you're a military officer, one of the things that you can do as part of your career track in the Army is you can go get your master's degree and then go back and be a teacher at West Point.
Oh, okay.
So that's like 2 duty stations in a row. One, go to college, get a master's degree. Or an advanced degree, might be a PhD for people who already have their master's, and then go spend 3 years teaching at West Point, right? And so we had like captains, majors, lieutenant colonels, like those were like a lot of our instructors. And then there's like some civilians sprinkled in here and there. And so my teacher, and I can't remember his name, but I remember his demeanor. I remember his attitude. He was either a captain or a major, and he was just not very nice, and the one thing that he told us, and I tell this to people all the time, is somebody would ask him a question and he would go, "Did you read the book?" He'd be like, "Well, sir, actually I just don't understand this." He's like, "But did you read the book?" And he'd be like, "Well, yes, sir, I did read the book." He's like, "So the answer's in the book?" It's like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "Well, go read the book. Get the answer out of the book." And he would just, because he's just taking it the Thayer method to an extreme. Like the Thayer method is like what the whole curriculum at West Point is based on. You're supposed to learn on your own and then come to class with questions. And many of the instructors firmly believed in this methodology, because many of our instructors who were military officers went to West Point and went through this. And it's like a continuation of a way of teaching people, right? So I think I'm going to try it with my kids. Like, hey, go teach yourself that. and come back to me and ask questions. Like that's what dad's homeschool would look like for our family.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure that wouldn't go well.
Maybe you could come to our house and try. I mean, this sounds great.
Yeah. So that was the Thayer method. And so this guy, so I try to impart that to people a lot of the times, especially in our franchise organization. Like, hey guys, please, I have taken a lot of time and expended a lot of resources writing down the answers to many questions, right? In the form of our handbook and like education curriculum. And like, please read that first. So first, just read that, go take the clock. Like we have it set up in a way that you can kind of step through it and take quizzes and really absorb it. I'm like, but I'm not a jerk. I'm not like that principled. I'll tell them most of the time, if I know that specifically the exact answer that they're looking for is in the book, I'll forward them the link and be like, here's the answer to your question in the form of a link. But part of me every once in a while wants to be like, did you read the book?
Did you read the book?
Read the manual.
Did you read the book? So the answer's in the book. Yeah.
Even if you don't remember his name, just picturing him in your head.
I will never forget it.
Yeah.
That interaction, just in particular. So I don't know. I've always been a little bit of an autodidact. So like that environment was fine with me, but man, there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I don't really learn that way. So cool. But
thanks. I did read the book.
I'll ask a classmate, right?
I'll ask my friend. Never mind. Yes, sir.
Yes,
I got it.
I got it. Yes, sir. I'm going to read the book.
Yes.
And so in the military too, you're kind of training for what you're going to be doing next. So tell us, I guess, about what you were training for and then what you ended up doing, after you graduated.
Yeah, I forget. I think it's senior year, earlier in the year, you pick what branch of service you want to be. And so for me, I thought I liked the idea of being an intelligence officer, being in military intelligence. So that's the branch that I went down. There wasn't a whole lot of, training specific to any branch of service at West Point. If anything, they really wanted everybody to have a good baseline of the main effort, right? Like infantry related training. There was some exposure to other branches, but at the end of the day, the infantry is really they'll tell you the primary main effort. Then the armor guys will get in there and be like, yeah, well, where are they going without tanks? And then the aviation guys come in and they're like, yeah, but what are you doing without close air support these days? Tell me about that. So these days, all of the combat arms are really the main effort. And so I think it's just easier and way less expensive to expose everybody to infantry training. So it's like, all right, we're going to go in the woods over there and, practice tactics, and go through drills. And so, and it's just like that's sort of the foundational military training, but really we spent a lot of time focused on values. Right. And so some of the bedrock values, that's what they call them, bedrock values. Like this is really the foundation of everything is your values, right? Because you can be an excellent tactician, but if you have no values, like Lord knows what's going to happen when we put you in a Bradley tank, like what's going to happen then, you know what I mean? So, what's going to happen when we put you in charge of soldiers, who are fighting to protect the country, and you don't have the right value set. So we spent a lot of time focused on values, hours and hours and hours of values training, scenarios, hey, this is a situation that happened, just a lot of time focused on learning the 7 Army values. Right. So
would you say in those scenarios, they would give you situations and then are you supposed to, is it a test to say, what do you do in the situation? Of seeing how your values are matching up.
There was never like a values test,
right?
You know what I mean, per se, but there was a lot of conversations and hey, listen, what should happen in this scenario? You know what I mean? There was a lot of Cadet X and Cadet Y, Cadet X stayed up late one night and, was trying to finish his social paper for that was due tomorrow. And he didn't document that he plagiarized this paragraph from Cadet Y.
Okay.
And Cadet Y was aware of it. So Cadet X is clearly wrong for plagiary and not documenting, because, what they would tell us is like, hey, plagiarize all you want to. But if you don't document the fact that you essentially took this entire paragraph from somebody else's paper,
Right.
we're going to roast you, like, and kick you out of school. Right. But if you say like, hey, I took this whole paragraph from this other person because I'll tell you why, I was running late on the paper. They're like, all right, that's fine. You still fail the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
You're not kicked out of school
forever, but you're not kicked out of school. So that's what they would call the choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. So there was a lot of conversations like that,
Basically, like, how are you going to respond when the game is on the line, right? Like,
Right.
in terms of,
Exactly.
I know there was a guy that's was a Green Beret, and he talked about, all the training they did. There was nothing really that could prepare somebody for, a gunfight, right? And how
Right.
they're going to respond, but trying to put you through as many scenarios as possible. And so, what was going on in the world while you were serving? I guess any particular stories that stand out in terms of your experience there?
Well, so I started at West Point in the fall of 2000. Right. So I graduated high school in 2000 and graduated West Point in 2004. So yeah, the fall of my sophomore year, 9/11 happened. Right. And I remember, I think like a lot of people do, like where I was and my walk to class.
Mm-hmm.
Craziest thing, right? So we walk to class. It's a beautiful day, blue skies. Like it's upstate New York in September, right? So it was a nice day, right? And we go to class, and the lieutenant colonel who was teaching our economics class, right, had the TV on, and we all watched as the towers were burning, right? And then he turned the TV off and said, "Okay, guys, here's the deal. That's happening, right? So something bad's happening. We're going to continue the mission. We're going to go ahead and just have class, right? We're not canceling classes. We're going to continue the mission." He's like, "You're going to be in scenarios and in combat where somebody dies right there,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to continue the mission. Something bad's going to happen, and you've got to continue the mission. So we're going to continue the mission, and we're going to do that right now by having our normal economics class." And we're all just sitting there like,
Wow.
"What?" Okay, sir. But can we turn the TV back? Like, what
Right.
the hell is happening? We thought we were like on the list of targets. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we were further down than we thought. You know what I mean? But at a certain point, we're like, wait, were we on the list of targets?
Right. I can imagine like what's going on in all your heads at that point. I mean,
So that was probably the major thing. And then, and then the war in Afghanistan kicked off, and then the war in Iraq kicked off. And so by the time we graduated, it was like, okay, hey, you're graduating, you're going through your officer basic course, but get ready, because guess where you're going next? Like, and we went to war, so it's wild to even think about it, from where I'm sitting right now. But some of the folks that I graduated with, died in combat. And then a lot of folks stayed in, and I got to reconnect with a lot of those folks. I'm like, so tell me, like, how many deployments have you been on? And the average, I think, is 5 to 10 deployments for our classmates who stayed in the Army, right? And I'm talking about combat deployments, right? Like going into theater and being, at a minimum of 5 to 10. I only did one in my, 5 years in the Army, but the folks that stayed in did multiple tours over and over and over again. So yeah, so that was, there were some big events happening.
Yeah. Is there anything kind of reflecting back that kind of helped you process and kind of unpack some of those things that you went through and saw, and kind of prepare you more for, I guess, civilian life after?
No, I was still, all that stuff was happening. I'm still like a college kid,
Mm-hmm.
We're still living our life in the post 9/11 world, like the early post 9/11 world, as best we could. And then being in the Army, there's no way to prepare, like really, really, really prepare for that transition back to the civilian sector, right? Especially in the way that that I did it. I think I did the best I could. I actually ended up, before I came to Jacksonville, I ended up going to work for very briefly for General Electric up in back in upstate New York. And, so that if I had stayed at GE, I think that would have been probably an easier transition, because I'm going from one very large organization to another, going from being one very small cog in a very large organization to being a very small cog in another very large organization. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing I didn't like about being at GE was, it wasn't as clear of a mission anymore. Like, wait, what are we doing here? I knew what I was doing in the Army, but at GE, I was like, wait, what are we doing? I'm working on like a wind farm product catalog. I'm like, oh, cool. It's kind of, I don't know. What am I doing here? And then it was a bad time to be at GE, because they got hit really hard by the financial crisis in 2009. So GE Financial took a real big hit. And think about an organization like GE, where they compensate people as they go and stock options. And so if you've been there for a really long time and you're part of sort of the core culture of GE, your retirement just took a 90% hit. Mm-hmm. You're just like, all right, cool. Those people were not super fun to be around. No. So when I got the phone call, like, hey, from my buddy, he called me. He's like, hey, my brother and his partner want to expand their fence business into Jacksonville, Florida, and they need an operating partner to run it. I was like, yeah, sure. Sign me up. I'm out of here. I'm out of GE. Forget you, GE. I'm going to go.
Team morale may have been a little down at GE. Perfect time to leave.
But yeah, it was the perfect time to leave and go to Florida in 2009 and start a construction business, right? Like a construction related business.
Yeah,
they were like literally shutting down like everything related. It was the worst. I did an interview recently and I was like, I think that should have been the worst decision that I ever made. Right. And some people in my family, my older brother will tell you, he's like, I told you at the time that was the worst possible thing that you could do. What are you thinking? Leaving a company like GE to go and start a construction business in Florida. And this he's like, are you crazy? He got mad at me. I was like, I don't want to talk to you about this. I'm going to do what I want.
Right? Zuckerberg, why would you leave Harvard and start Facebook? Were you crazy?
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about that. That's interesting. The early days when I'm sure it was, what are some of the struggles, the pitfalls, things that you could share with us about when you first started that? It
was funny because I brought this sort of junior military officer mentality to the table.
Nice.
I'm like, give me 90 days. I'm going to have this thing humming.
Nice.
Right? And
read the book.
Yeah. I was like, wait, hey guys, there's no book. Wait, hold on a second now. Oh, and there's no, senior enlisted officers who've been in the Army for 15 years, who've been a part of the company for 15 or 20 years to kind of like guide me, like my crazy self, like into there's no institutional knowledge here. Okay. So there's no book, there's no institutional knowledge. All right. So it might take a little bit longer than 90 days. I mean, I got whipped around starting a small business. Right. In construction. I think the only thing that I had going for me is, I studied systems engineering at West Point. I had my sort of like bedrock values and I knew how to like persevere through extremely challenging situations. Mm-hmm. Right. And it was really challenging. And anybody who's ever started a business is like, yeah, dummy. It's hard to start a business. What were you thinking? Like, how'd you even survive that? So yeah, the first 9 months were extremely difficult. Just trying to get everything under control. Stuff would just go wrong, and I'm like, why is that going wrong? And it wasn't just stuff that was within our control, right? It was like a vendor would ship us an order, and it's completely wrong. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Like, I didn't order that. You sent me the wrong stuff. They're like, sorry. Is that a big deal? I'm like, yeah, it's a big deal. I'm sitting out in
kind of.
One name I'll never forget is Hal Gruen, one of our customers early on. He had ordered a fence and it was a ornamental aluminum, like black ornamental aluminum fence. And to go around his yard in Ponte Vedra. And we got out there and we opened everything up. I'm like, wait a second, this is the wrong fence. It's like, geez Louise. And it wasn't a mistake that we had made. It was a mistake that the manufacturer had made. So everything from, installation crews, quitting abruptly, jobs going sideways, people quitting, just all the things that you go through, like managing really tight cash flow, like trying to figure out, we got to like December and I'm like, cash flow is really tight. We somehow made it through. But everything kind of calmed down, I think, within it actually took 7 months for me to have a month where I was like, okay, I can take a deep breath and everything's fine. And like everybody kind of did what they were supposed to all month. So that's how the startup phase went. And it was tough.
And in the early phases, are you physically out there working with the crews, or did you already have kind of established crews that you're just kind of managing?
So when I started, we worked primarily with subcontractor crews. It's very common in the construction industry to hire subcontractors to perform the work. The difficult thing for me was it took me a long time. It took a number of months to find the crews that could actually do the work, that could do good work and do the things that we expected them to do and would maintain the quality standards that we expected.
You could rely on.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. And, it's like, hey, I'm asking you to show up tomorrow, and they show up tomorrow about approximately at the time that they're supposed to. I had to get used to that.
That had to be hard after being in the military.
If you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're late, don't bother showing up. They're
That's
like,
right.
all right, I won't be there. I'm like, but you can be a little late. Like not like don't bother. I'm just saying, like, kind of show up on time a little bit, guys. I had to soften my approach in so many ways. I'd yell at people, be like, rah, 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 rah. That's what we did in the Army. You know what I mean? You could, you could be very direct with people, right?
Yes.
They were under contract, and if they didn't show up tomorrow, they were AWOL and they'd go to jail. So they had to show back up tomorrow and deal with it, right? But you could be as direct as you wanted to be. In a small business, you're as direct as you want to be with people. And they're like, you know what I'm not going to do? I'm not going to show up tomorrow. You're like, oh, now I got to do that guy's job tomorrow and the next day until I get somebody else in. So there was a lot of that. But
so many uncontrollables.
Yeah. So, but early on, I didn't start working like full time out in the field until I realized how difficult it was going to be for me personally to scale the business with subcontractors. Cause I had a wonderful team, a wonderful subcontractor team. Like I love the guys, we treated them like they were like part of the team. They did great work. Customers loved them. But I was like, hey, can you somehow expand and grow into multiple crews? And the guy's like, no. I'm like, all right, okay. So, well, I guess we can't do that. So, but I want to keep growing my business. I don't want to work with other subcontractors. I want to, I want to do this a little bit differently. So that's when I made the decision to start employing people directly.
Okay.
And we went away from the subcontractor model. Robbie, who was our sub, for so long, he stayed with us for probably 5 or 6 years through that. So we had a good long run, and I haven't talked to him lately, but I really enjoyed working with Robbie. Right. But whenever I made the decision to start, run an employee-based cruise, I realized like all of a sudden, like there's still no book, right? So there's still no book on installation. There are some books in this world on fence installation, but really, truly, honestly, there's not really like a good book. Even the technical manuals are like not super helpful if you're trying to teach somebody how to install a fence. And 16 years ago in the fence industry, training, especially the fence industry, like going through that economic environment, training was sort of like the last priority. We're just getting to a point in the fence industry where training, everybody's realizing like, oh yeah, training is important, right? Helping people train qualified fence crews is an important concept. So I felt like I had to write the book on how to install a fence step by step. And so I created a manual, but I had to go out there and install fence to make sure I was writing down the correct things. And so it took probably 1.5 to 2 years to get 2 additional crews established, and it needed to be 2 additional crews because the business started to grow. Like we had pretty anemic growth, I would say, from 2009 to 2012. But in 2013, the economy recovered a bit and started sort of like the path of recovery, the kind of bull run we've been on the last 12 years. So I needed more people and I needed more installation crews and all that stuff. So that was a very labor intensive time in my journey as like a business owner, where I was like literally like I would call Carly and be like, hey, I'm not coming home until later because I'm stuck on Miss Jones' job. 2 guys didn't show up for work today, so I'm out here working with a day laborer to finish this job, and it's just going real slow.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't think I married a fence installer.
You did now.
What is happening? I'm like, well,
At what point in your marriage is this or had you guys been just married a couple of years? How'd you guys meet?
So we met in Tyler at a barbecue restaurant called the
Texas.
Purple Pig. We met at the Purple Pig.
Pig.
The Purple Pig. I in between being in the Army and working for GE, I called my dad and I was like, hey, do you mind if I crash with you for a couple of months while I'm, figuring out what I'm going to do next? He's like, yeah, sure. That's great. So we were hanging out with some of his friends one day. And he's like, hey, one of the guys from work plays in a band and they're going to be playing at this barbecue restaurant in town tonight called the Purple Pig. Would you like to go? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Great. One of the other guys in the band was friends with some of Carly's friends, and she was up from Houston visiting with them. And so the 2 guys in the band, like one guy knew my dad and one guy knew Carly's friends, Eric and Elizabeth, and we were all up there together. And we just kind of hit it off.
Just both visiting.
That's
oh my gosh. Thank you, Purple Pig.
Yeah. Thanks but the Purple Pig is no longer, unfortunately. But we do have
I was going to say, you guys can take all the kids there. You have a picture of it in your home. I love
We
that.
memorialized the Purple Pig.
Nice.
And so she came with you to Jacksonville to kind of help.
Not initially, she came to visit me in New York when I was working for GE. And then I explained to her, this idea that I had to go to Florida and start a business. And she was like,
wow.
I don't know. I don't think she yelled at me the way my brother did. But she was, a bit skeptical about it. And then I moved to Florida, and she waited. I think I proposed to her in the fall of 2009. So we'd known each other for about a year before I proposed, and I took her back to the Purple Pig.
Oh, you did?
I did. I proposed
Nice.
to the Purple Pig.
That's amazing.
So, and then we got married in October of 2010, and she moved here. She had moved here, I think, in the summertime, but then she was back and forth to Houston a lot, kind of coordinating the wedding and all that. So yeah, and then the rest is history.
That is amazing.
She was a school teacher by trade, and then she taught. She was a substitute teacher here because she wasn't sure which school she wanted to end up at. And then she went to work actually for a preschool downtown for a bit. And then she actually came to work the last, I think, year before our first was born. She came to work with me at the office. And that was
nice.
It was a short-lived experiment.
A fun little adventure, maybe not long-term. Yeah.
She's the problem was she's the boss, but at work I was the boss, and I'm like, hey, at work I'm the boss. She's like, nah, I don't know about all that. I'm like, well, but to everybody else here I am. She's like,
we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know about all that.
Optics say, can you help me?
I'm like, hey, can you do this for me? She's like, don't talk to me like that. I'm like, I don't know. I'm like
maybe.
Yeah.
So she's always been the boss, but then she got pregnant with Tyler, and that was kicked off a journey with all of that. So,
yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you too, because I know there was a lot of infrastructure things that you wanted to work out, but I mean, were you guys just getting enough business through is this online advertising, Google searches, referrals? I mean, how are you guys able to grow and get that much business?
I think I brought a different approach to this business, right, from scratch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of it was just I was super laser focused on customer satisfaction. Like to me, I felt like we were getting graded by our customers in the form of online reviews. And it was very important for me to get a good grade, right? One of the things about West Point that I didn't mention was I was always getting graded. You're always getting graded and ranked. Like you'd get your class ranking periodically, like twice a year, you'd get your class ranking. And it's like, where do I stand against everybody? Like, where am I ranking? Like, so I'm very much, for better or for worse, driven by like what my grade is. And for this business, my grade, you know, it took me a long time to realize that the real grade is the bottom line at the end of the day. But for me, it was always like, okay, well, like, what's our reputation? You know, how are we perceived? And so I focused a lot on customer satisfaction and just like making sure that customers were super happy. And I think that a lot of people who get into business, especially in our business, they want to hit like some form of like easy button where it's like, okay, if I run this, like if I put money into the Google ATM, it's going to spit back all these leads and all this stuff. And there's like, surely there's some sort of like easy button to hit. And I don't, that's I think a fundamental mistake. Like you have to be focused on, you know, bringing a high level of customer service, you know, to your customers, because those are the people who are like, oh yeah, hey, I just got my fence done. It was great. These guys did it. You should call them. And that referral carries so much weight with people. Because then people are like, oh yeah, I'll call those guys. Good. I don't want to have to search around and get 50 quotes. You had a great experience with these people. Great. I'm going to call them. And so we got a lot of traction there. Early on, one thing that helped us was that we had a relationship with Home Depot, which we still have. But that was helpful to give us kind of like a baseline of business. So the Home Depot, we would help their customers with fence installation. So a Home Depot customer would call us and say, hey, you know, I want to get a fence installed. And so we would go out there and, you know, be Home Depot for these people and install a fence. And we've done that here locally in Jacksonville for 16 years. And it's been a part of, I'd say about 50% or so of our franchise locations, maybe less, maybe 40%, are working with Home Depot in some way, shape, or form around the country. So, But for us early on, that was helpful. But we kept growing and growing and growing every single year. I mean, I think we've made the Fast 50 list in Jacksonville. I don't know, let's call it like 5 to 10 times over the last 16 years.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
What strikes me about that is what you just said about is what you were talking about earlier, is the values, the foundation of your values.
Right.
That so many people make the mistake of going into a business and seeing the end goal as being the bottom line, which ultimately, you know, so many businesses, if you're focusing on the values and the foundation, that you're going to get great reviews because, you know, and then you're going to have more business. So I know, I guess that, I'm sure I'm saying super smart stuff. That seems like really obvious, but you know, you did it right. Like, you know, there's so many places that could have had a small relationship with Home Depot that weren't accountable, that didn't do a great job, that weren't totally focused on, you know, training and getting the job done right and having good customer service and making their customers happy, providing a good product and a service. And I'm sure those relationships that Home Depot said, we're not going to refer you to these people, but you have been so successful because you're focused on the values and the foundational things.
If all I cared about was making money, a way to say it differently, right? If all I cared about was making money, there are many things that I would never do that I do so that people are happy, right? Like, okay, hey, we hit an irrigation line while we were installing your fence. That happens all the time. People get very upset about that. You know, I'm like, hey, listen, there's no way to tell where the plastic pipes are buried like 6 to 12 inches underground. And in some areas, it's like 3 feet underground where those plastic pipes are. People are like, I can't believe you hit my irrigation line. I'm like, you can't believe it? So I'm going to explain it again. Like there's plastic pipes underground.
I can't see through the grass. There's no x-ray to see it. It's uncontrollable.
I'm going to invent a plastic locator, and it's going to be a thing
Yes.
It's like everybody will use it. Everybody will have
Oh,
a
yes.
plastic locator.
Well, it's funny because I remember
Yes.
before I knew who you were, but I'd never really had a conversation with you before I knew you had a fencing business, and you guys were pretty well established at this point. And I'll never forget driving by one of our neighbors, and you're out there by yourself putting up his fence. And I'm like,
That's
man,
right.
fence.
David Melvin's
that
fence.
is a guy right there that is willing to do whatever it takes. I'm sure he's got 50 people he could call, but he's like, listen, you knew that, hey, this is a friend, this is a neighbor. I've got to go in and make sure this is a good job. And I'm like, that's the guy that you want to hire when you need a fence. And I think the secret sauce that you added to this, and I really wanted to get to this today to talk about how, you took what, some would say would a simple business of fencing you took the standard operating procedures, you took your relationships, and you franchise it to over 100 franchises doing, 189 million. So it was that kind of the tipping point for you when you had this manual. You're like, hey, now that I've got this that nobody else has done in the industry, that I can then turn this into a franchise opportunity. I guess tell us about kind of that decision and process to do that.
People ask me all the time, like, why'd you franchise? Why did you do that? And I'm like, listen, it wasn't my idea. And it wasn't my idea. I was perfectly happy. I felt like I had a good business in Jacksonville and things were going well. And I had no inclination to do what we did. What happened was one of the guys that I originally partnered up with, right, in early 2009, I come here, I'm the operating partner of this business for 3 years. After 3 years, I was like, hey guys, I don't want to share the profits with you anymore, essentially, because I'm like, listen, I'm doing all of the work and blah, blah, blah. So I bought my two partners out, these guys, Chris and Randy. 3 years later in 2016, very late in 2016, Chris called me and he's like, hey, he maintained his location down in Orlando. He was the guy that started Superior Fence and Rail and grew us to 5 locations in Florida during the 2000s. Right. And there was no further expansion until we started franchising, but he called me and he was like, hey, listen, what you're doing in Jacksonville is different than any of the other 5 locations. He's like, you're doing things differently than I'm doing down here in Orlando, than Todd in Melbourne, Ken in Winter Haven, like all the other guys that were in the system at that time. And he's like, I really think that what you're doing could be the basis for a franchise concept. And he's like, that's what I've always wanted to do. So Chris had, for a number of years, I think formally since 2008 at least, he had wanted to franchise the concept, but he always had this idea that something was missing. And so I ended up being the missing ingredient for Chris. And I agreed to do it because I was fairly comfortable at the time. I'm like, I don't know, man. What do I want to do? Like take a risk, like stress myself out. I've got a good thing going here. But the reason why I agreed to do it was I was like, well, I've kind of always wanted to do a software project for the business to create like proprietary technology that's just for our business. It drove me crazy being an information systems guy that there wasn't one single platform that could do the things that I wanted our business to do, right? The way that I wanted to do them, right? So I was like, okay, Chris, well, condition number 1, we do the software project. And then I don't even know if there was other conditions. I was like, all right, that's fine. Whatever. We'll do this. Nobody had franchised in the fence industry up to that point successfully. People had tried, but they hadn't done it. Now in Australia, they'd done it. Right. So interesting fact, the Aussies, I think the Aussies were the first ones to successfully franchise in the fence business. Jim's Fencing, look him up. Jim's got like all kinds of franchise businesses over there in Australia.
Oh, nice.
Seems like quite the guy. So anyway, so I said, hey, why not? We'll see because we didn't, the thing that made the decision really easy for me was there wasn't a huge capital investment. Chris is like, hey, I think we can kind of shoestring this thing and figure it out. He's like, I'll do the legal aspect because he's an attorney. He's like, you have all the operation side of things. He's like, basically, I'll bring him into the system, make sure everything's legally correct, and then you can get him up and running, and we'll see how it works. I was like, all right, it's fine. So all of 2017, we kind of prepared for this to happen. And then we had a prospect, and we got him across the finish line, and Gary and Andrea were our first franchisees over in Fort Myers. And then we had a couple more that signed up that year, and everything broke. Everything broke. We came into it with this great plan. And you know what they say?
Let's go.
Like, no plan survives first contact. Like, our plan got obliterated by first contact. And when I say everything went wrong, I mean everything went wrong. We had an idea of how the technology was going to work. Didn't work. We had an idea of how even just like our overall IT infrastructure was going to work. Didn't work. We had an idea of how the vendor relationships were going to work. We knew there was going to be some issues with some of the vendor relationships that we had. Didn't work.
Wow.
And then there was just the struggle of, and the realization is that what we're doing is helping other people far away start businesses from scratch. And so all those trials and tribulations that I went through back when I first got started, these folks were going through to a lesser extent. But then I'm also going through the trials and tribulations of starting a business where everything is breaking. So 2018, I tell people 2018 literally almost killed me. I'm like convinced that I almost died that year because of just the sheer amount of stress.
Yeah.
Of like, and oh, by the way, it was 2018. And at some point that year, gosh, when would it have been? About the summer? No, the summertime. Yeah, the summertime. We were on our way home from a summer trip with our 1-year-old and our 3-year-old. And Carly looks at me. She says,
guess what?
I think I'm pregnant. I'm like, I sure hope you are, because you've been in a real bad mood. And that's her marker. She's in a real bad mood. And like, I'm like, are you pregnant? She's like, oh yeah, of course you think. I'm like, but no, really? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So we found out on the way home from a summer vacation that she was pregnant. And I was just like, man, that's a lot. And we moved, and there was just like, I would wake up and work at like 4:00 in the morning until 7:00 when the kids got up, like get them to preschool, all the things, like, and then go to work and be crushed by work all day, come home, spend some time with the family, and then go back to work until like midnight. And I rinsed and repeated that from probably, December of 2017 or January of 2017, all the way until, late into 2018. And oh, by the way, a hurricane hit in Southwest Florida, a really bad one. I can't remember the name of the storm, but a really bad storm hit like right before the guy opened. And Chris and I had bought a commercial property down there, and we're like, okay, we're going to buy a commercial property and lease it back to the guy. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yes.
Oh, geez.
And one of the buildings got condemned because of the storm.
Because of the storm, hurricane.
Just when I say everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, I'm not exaggerating, So
were you drawing on all of these years of being adaptable and just all that? I mean, when you're going through those things, what do you draw on?
You go to baseline and you're like, okay, this is overwhelming. I'm sure I had like some tears at times. I'm like, this is too overwhelming. But then you just find a way to reset. I don't know. I can't even tell you like right now I'm busy at work, and I'm like, okay, let me find a way to reset, get on top of things. And if I feel like I can get on top of things, then I can, one thing at a time, like, okay, let me do this and then I'll do this and just take things one thing at a time. I'll make it through it. Right. I'll get through it. So,
and I know we only have a couple minutes left, but, I'm just picturing, like when your professor turned off the TV, you had to stick with the mission, right? The mission was, hey, I've committed to doing this franchise. I've got this, I've got my family. I've got to move. I've got, my own personal franchise I'm operating here in Jacksonville, and you stuck with it. And most people probably wouldn't have done that.
Well, and it wasn't just all of my stuff that was going on, right? It was the fact that these people had placed their trust in me, because I was like, hey, we have a business concept. I promise, like, the things that are going wrong shouldn't be going wrong, and we'll fix them. And we did. It's like they placed their trust in me. And for years, even to this day, when we open a new location, I'm like, I'm nervous about that. I'm real nervous about that. I hope, I'm worried that these guys aren't going to do well, and it's because like they are literally placing their trust in us. And even though we've sold the business right? Even though we've done all of those things, I still feel that burden. I'll probably carry it with me for years after I leave, this business and go do something else. It's still like, I won't say it'll haunt me, but I'm still going to be always aware that people place their trust in me, and people have told me many times over, I'm doing this because I trust what you're telling me. And you don't have like those bedrock values of integrity, and loyalty and selfless service to others, and not, feel something when somebody tells you that. And then they stake their fortune in some cases, like this small fortune that they built up over here. They're like, okay, I'm going to risk all of that in this endeavor. So just a tremendous amount of weight. But I've had people tell me, they're like, dude, I think you care more about my money than I do. And I'm like, yeah, because I can keep track of it a little bit better because you're real busy over here. But I'm like, why is this happening? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, dude, that's your money. And he's like, good deal. He's like, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's cared about my money more than I do. And I'm like, all right, well, good. Fix it. I don't know. Good. Fix it.
We need more people like just more and more and more values like that today.
Right. Yeah.
Young people, old people, everyone my age. How do you, and because your lovely wife and adorable, such sweet, respectful, well-behaved children that we've had the pleasure of meeting in different, just being in the neighborhood at Sunday school. You really have a wonderful family. And I'm just so curious. I know you and Carly are really a team. She's the boss, you're the boss. Mm-hmm. How are you, especially for, you have a very young family. Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you guys are doing? Like, any advice for parents that are just starting out?
Oh, I don't know about advice for parents.
I mean, doing great, just seeing your kids, I know that you guys obviously pass these values onto them of integrity and doing the right thing instead of doing things right, focusing on doing the right thing.
We have a lot of those conversations, right? Of setting the right example, especially now as the kids are getting older. I had that conversation this morning, like, hey, bud, you're the older kid. You know what I mean? Rather than participating in the bad behavior, you should be modeling good behavior, right? It's like, yes. Okay. All right.
Big brother,
right? When the kids do something that they don't have integrity, it's like, listen, that's all you have. All you have is your integrity, right? So, don't hide stuff, It's okay if you did something wrong. It's really not okay, but it's okay if you did something wrong. I don't know if I could go so far as to have advice for other parents, though. I mean, a lot of the times I feel like I'm just in survival mode with the kids.
With that age group,
there's 4 of them. People are like, I don't understand how you do it. But so, we're just trying to raise good humans at the end of the day. And I worry sometimes that we're too hard on them. And then sometimes I worry we're not hard enough. And I worry a lot about, are these little people going to turn into good humans? And that's really all I want for them. At the end of the day, they could be whatever they want to be. They could be business owners. They could be lawyers, doctors, they could be garbage collectors. They could, be in trades. Like, I don't care what they do with themselves. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, if they're good humans, that's really all that matters, right?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Try to keep that in mind.
Well, last question too, and just to kind of fast forward to today. So obviously you built it up to over 100 locations, almost 200 million in revenue. You sold to a private equity firm. Was that 2 years ago, or how long ago was that?
We just hit the 3-year anniversary, right? And we actually our goal this year is to do a little bit over 300 million in revenue. And we're like, any day now, we're going to pass over that threshold in the trailing 12-month period. Right. So we've seen a lot of growth. I mean, we've grown, almost 400% over the last 3 years from a revenue standpoint. Like, the number of locations has gone up dramatically. There's been a really good run the last couple of years, But yeah, 3 years since the anniversary of the sale. It's gone by quick.
Wow. That's incredible. And so kind of last question we like to ask about this kind of ties into the parenting thing too as well. But, at grit.org, we have the Grit Creed, which are 12 principles that we believe strongly just in instilling in that next generation. And always curious with guests, which part of the Grit Creed resonates most with you and why, would you say?
So the part of it that I aspire to be the most, the part that I wish I could say, you know, this is me to a T, is I'm cool, calm, and collected, right? I wish I could be more cool, calm, and collected. And I try all the time to be cool, calm, and collected. And I think that one of the things that parenting has taught me is that I just need to be a more patient person, right? Because the little people are just going to take forever. Shoes on. They're like, no, I got it. And it's like, yeah, no, but I'm going to do it. They're like, no, I've got it. It's like, okay, I'm just going to take a big, deep breath over here, stay cool, calm, and collected, find my cool, calm center. I'm not great at that though. You know, I am not cool, calm, and collected all the time. So I would say, honestly, the part that says I can, I will, and I'm going to is my mantra in the face of adversity. You know, I wrote our values down for Superior Fence and Rail a long time ago. I think 2014, 2015 might have been when I formally wrote them down. But our number one value is positivity, right? And that I like to tell people, it's not like puppy dog tails and ice cream. Like, oh, it's a great day, isn't it? But it is like my number one value is positivity. Today is a great day, and I will overcome any challenge with powerful optimism, right? Ooh. And I think that's it, right? Like that's what you have to do, because, you know, in our business, it's a human endeavor. Like the machines haven't taken over. They're not talking to people yet. They're definitely
not building fences.
No, you know, ask AI to build you a fence and see like what happens. It's pretty comical, actually. I've asked AI to, you know,
oh, I want to look that up.
Build a fence. Like, hey, build a fence and show me a picture of the finished product. And it's
see what the manual is that it comes up with. Interesting.
Yeah. So they haven't done that yet. So it's a human enterprise, and humans are really great at making mistakes, you know, and mistakes just happen. Vendors make mistakes, you know, our team makes mistakes, customers make mistakes. It happens. You know, they're like, oh, I thought I told you this. I'm like, no, ma'am, no, you didn't. In writing, we agreed to this. And they're like, okay, well, I made a mistake. It's like, okay, all right, we'll figure it out. That's okay. Everything's okay. You know, we're going to figure it out. And so those are the two lines that really hit home with me.
Great. Well, what a great episode getting to talk to you and get to know you better today, Zach, and really appreciate you being on and hearing more about West Point and the fencing business. So thanks for tuning in today to the Grit.org podcast, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.